How did President Trump do in his State of the Union address? Is there any Virginia politician who's not plagued by a scandal? Which was worse, the Super Bowl or the halftime show? And find out what the media missed in our most underreported stories of the week. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is The Square Circle. Welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Christian Bernard of Young Voices, Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, and progressive journalist Zed Jelani. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
All right.
President Trump delivered his State of the Union speech this week, and, as could be expected, it has received praise from Republicans and criticism from Democrats. Zed Jelani, fellow at Berkeley Greater Good Science Center think tank. How do you think Trump did?
Well, I think in some ways, by his standards, he was fairly subdued. He had made a number of gestures to bipartisanship. He made a number of gestures of uniting the country, of endorsing policies like paid leave, which I think many people can get behind. But at the same time, I think he still wasn't able to resist that urge to kind of poke his finger in the eye of some of his opponents, to make bold claims about his presidency that just really aren't backed up by facts. And so, I think that's really the sort of the zeitgeist of the Trump presidency is that, this man has a chance to be quite a uniting figure because he's not a doctrinaire Republican. But he often chooses to engage in feuds and sort of rivalries, and I think that undercuts the message. I do think the speech, I think the CNN polled people as like 70 or 75% approval, so I do think he maybe made some steps in that direction. But then on the next day on Twitter, he's out there bashing the Democrats. And, the question is, don't you really have to pick one posture? Don't you have to either want to be a uniter or want to be a divider? And I think, unfortunately, he often goes on the division side.
Christian Bernard, Young Voices, what's your opinion?
I think that Trump's rhetoric, of course, is always going to be aggressive. And like you said, Zed, it was probably subdued by his standards. I think there were a couple high points that are worth noting. The First Step Act is definitely legislation, criminal justice reform worth touting, as well as the fact that 58% of the newly created jobs were filled by women. That was definitely a high point that attracted a lot of applause from a lot of the leftist women newly elected to Congress that ran specifically against him. So that was definitely a high point. But of course, yes, some of his statements on foreign policy were highly questionable about this idea that if he had not been president, that they would be at war with North Korea. I think that is kind of crazy. But there were definitely some good high points worth noting. But yes, of course, you can't forget that he's going to take to Twitter the next day and tear it all back down.
Well, we count on him for that, don't we?
Yeah, of course.
And Gregory Clay, what's your opinion?
Well, Donald Trump, of course, likes to have everything both ways. As what Bernard was just saying, he can unite and then he can divide. Sometimes in the same sentence, sometimes in the same phrase, just separated by commas, But one thing that Donald Trump did that struck me is that I think his speech was more so getting ready for 2020. It's obvious he wants to be a factor, and I think that speech kind of set the tone, especially when he discussed socialism. And he obviously was trying to make a distinction, and he went straight after AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But notice what he did, though, which was very clever. He molded socialism to the form of South America. Where? Venezuela. Hey, think about it. Bernie Sanders, the socialistic dude, when he talks about socialism, he ties it to where?
Scandinavia.
There you go. It's a major difference. The D word in the House. And he said, hey, wait a minute here. Y'all love this socialism thing. Hey, check out the south of us, Venezuela, And I'm sure that probably, has Bernie a little shaky, because as Bernard just said, he ties it to Scandinavia. And I thought that was very clever on Donald Trump's part, because now I think a lot of folk are going to say, wait a minute now. Maybe we should rethink this socialism thing, because do you really want to be like Venezuela? And most people, I don't think so.
Any response to that?
Well, I think Sanders was smart in that I think a week or two ago he put out a statement kind of distancing himself from the Venezuelan government, kind of making clear that's really not what he's all about. And that's really a challenge for, there's more and more, especially people left of center, calling themselves socialists now. And they have to be able to explain to Americans what that looks like. Because there are examples of places all over the world that use that word that are not the kind of outcomes Americans would want to seek. They don't want the Soviet Union, they don't want Venezuela, but they might want Denmark, Norway, or Finland, or Sweden.
Or Canada.
Yeah, I think when the kind of whole regime change, or potential regime change started, the ball started rolling, the Democratic Socialist Party was taking to Twitter and doing a lot of PR work trying to say that this is not real democratic socialism, this should not be identified or conflated with their calls for Medicare for all or a Green New Deal, policies like that. So yeah, I think that, of course, the rhetoric around condemning socialism is always really strong as far as riling up Trump's base on the right and conservatives in general. But of course, it's not as simple as just saying that AOC and Bernie Sanders want socialism, applause line,
How did you guys feel about the rah-rah feeling that the whole thing had? There was an awful lot of chanting of USA.
It glorifies the executive. I think the State of the Union is way blown out of proportion. It's just all about glorifying the executive, something which, given the United States history, is kind of a peculiar thing. Why would you want to glorify the executive when executive overreach is such a big problem? Is why the United States of America was founded to begin with. It seems like it should be more about glorifying rule of law, the legislative branch, the courts. I mean, you shouldn't just be the deference to the executive. It's probably the most prone branch of government to abuse. So I'm not really comfortable with the rah-rah environment there.
And you had all the liberal Democrat women dressed in white, of course. Now, my understanding that was symbolic of the women's suffrage movement. Am I correct on this?
That's right.
Yeah. And you notice they performed a lot of their little chants and stuff in mock derision of Donald Trump.
Oh, that was mock derision?
Some of it was mock derision. Am I right? Weren't they mocking him at times?
I think they were definitely
the women in white.
I think they were definitely.
I don't think they were seriously like saying, "Hey, man, we support you." I think they were kind of mocking Donald Trump.
Maybe there were points where Pelosi's clapping,
especially when they were high-fiving and all that. You cannot tell me that was serious. Hey, we high-fiving for Donald Trump. No, sorry, no way. No, I'm not buying that.
Okay.
No, it might be high-five, but it was jive.
Well, it was certainly gave us a lot to talk about, that's for sure. It was a lively one. I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, publicsquare.net, or via Facebook or Twitter, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Also this week, a third high-ranking politician in Virginia has come under fire for a decades-old incident. Here's the story from WSLS in Roanoke.
Another top Virginia Democrat admits to wearing blackface decades ago. Attorney General Mark Herring issued a statement saying he wore brown makeup and a wig in 1980 to look like a black rapper during a party as an undergraduate at the University of Virginia. In a statement, he says, in part, the blackface incident was a one-time occurrence and I accept full responsibility for my conduct. That conduct clearly shows that as a young man, I had a callous and inexcusable lack of awareness and insensitivity to the pain my behavior could inflict on others.
Christian Bernard with Young Voices. Do you think they will step down?
That's a very good question. I think that when the pressure was all on Northam, when it was just him that had been exposed to have been wearing blackface in the 80s, it was probably more likely at that point that he was going to step down. Because at that point, it seemed like, to some maybe, that it was an isolated incident. But when other politicians around him started to also kind of reveal that they had skeletons in their closet as well, it probably makes it more likely that they could maybe weather this political storm. I know that there's also some opposition research, happening now with Republicans in the Virginia legislature. So it's very possible that, it's definitely the case that not just Democrats are going to come out of this with tarnished reputations. But who knows if they'll step down? I think it's an abominable thing, the revelation that at least Herring and Northam, that they wore blackface. At a time, some people want to say that it happened a very long time ago. I don't think the 80s were a time where it was culturally acceptable to be wearing blackface. Hopefully not. Of course, I'm young and maybe I could be wrong there. So I think that to say it was something that happened a long time ago and to try to brush it off and weather the storm politically is really not going to seal the deal for them at all.
So Jelani, what's your opinion?
Well, what's interesting is that Virginia actually has one-term governors. So if Northam wanted to sit in place, even if his approvals didn't improve, and he could probably just manage it, but Herring has political aspirations. I think he's already basically declared he's going to run for governor next time. Justin Fairfax, if Northam had stepped down, Justin Fairfax would have become the governor. Right. So for those two, it's a little bit different situation. Of course, Fairfax has also been accused of a crime. Right. Those other two incidents seem like faux pas. I don't necessarily know why they made tasteless jokes like that, but it's the kind of thing you can apologize and move on. Being accused of a crime, though, Justin Fairfax could go to jail if that
sexual
ends
assault.
up being correct.
Yeah.
So that's a different situation. But I do think, I kind of took a lonely stance, kind of saying we should give Northam some room to apologize, and we should try to move on. It looked like a very lonely stand when I took it last week, but as time goes along, the reality is if 3 Democrats step down, the person who becomes governor is the GOP Speaker of the House. Right. And I don't think Democrats are willing to risk Medicaid expansion, willing to risk raising the minimum wage, all these policies that tangibly affect people's lives over a symbolic offense. With symbolic offense with hurt feelings, you can apologize. You can't bring someone back to life who dies from cancer, Right. So I think that it's becoming less and less likely that these folks step down because of that reason.
Gregory Clay, do you think they should step down?
Well, it depends on the temperature of the room, because nowadays, one thing I noticed, some people use what I call the E defense.
The E defense.
The E defense. What does that E mean? It means evolve. So what do? You did something crazy. You dressed up like you in the Ku Klux Klan and, lynching black folk and all this stuff. And you're doing this black folk crap, from 100 years ago. I'm from the South, so I remember blackface. And I remember the Ku Klux Klan. Now, what do? You say, I have what? Evolved. See, that's the going thing now. When you do something crazy, and it happened double-figure years ago, it's got to be double-figure years ago now.
No, double-figure.
Got to be double-figure years.
Can't be 10.
Now, if you did something 2 years ago and something crazy, you dressed up like a Ku Klux Klan clown, you can't be saying, hey, man, yes, it was 2 years ago, but I evolved. No, it ain't working that way. It's got to be double-figure years. Now, Ralph Northam, I can see him using, again, the E defense. I don't mean e-cigarettes either. You can say, look, I have evolved. There was a time, yes, I was in medical school. I wasn't a kid. I was 25. I was a full-blooded adult. But, he could say, hey, we were having fun. We were crazy. But, it was still school. I have evolved. Now, the other cat, Mark Herring, he could probably utilize the E defense again himself. Now, but it goes back to something that Zaid said. The cat in the middle, Justin Fairfax, he's up for sexual assault. Like Zaid said, that's a crime. That's a felony. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Democrats do with him. A, being a crime. 2, remember, we also have to go back to the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. What did the Senate hearings for the U.S. Supreme Court? The Democrats did what? They demanded hearings from the woman, what was her name? Christine Blasey Ford. Right. Demanded that she have her say. Okay? She was a professor too, doctor too. Look at the similarities. Vanessa Tyson is also what? A PhD professor also, right? The similarities are amazing. You can juxtapose Brett Kavanaugh with Justin Fairfax. Are the Democrats going to give Dr. Vanessa Tyson her time in
They
hearings.
actually both
Are
hired,
they going to do
they
that?
both hired the same lawyers as well. Fairfax hired Kavanaugh's lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and this woman has hired Dr. Ford's
Yeah,
lawyer.
from the
Well,
Katz
that's
firm, Deborah
interesting.
Katz, right? Yeah. So are the Democrats going to say, hearings, or are they going to be hypocritical because it's in their house and not the Republicans' house? So when stuff suddenly pops up in your house, knows how things change.
Yeah,
know.
we'll see what happens, though. I mean, I think that the optics would look terrible if a black man who was accused of sexual assault is the one who has to be banished from the public, but then Kavanaugh gets the lifetime Supreme Court appointment. Those are terrible optics, but
Yeah.
it is, I think, a little bit too early to tell. Hopefully, the Democrats will have.
But will she have her say? That's what I'm talking about.
I-
Yeah, I mean, the
hopefully
Democrats demanded that.
Well, it is that Cory Booker was asked about Fairfax, and he
Yeah.
brushed the question away. So I think
Oh,
some
he
will-
brushed it off.
So some will take
Yeah, there you
that
go.
approach, but also
Yeah.
the National Organization of Women, I think, has asked Fairfax to step down. So I think the liberal camp is divided on this. They don't entirely know where to go on the Fairfax.
They don't know. In other words, they don't know what the hell to do.
But you do raise an interesting point about the optics on that. That's
Right.
really the first that I've
Yeah.
heard talk about it.
Yeah.
It's how's it going to look
Right.
if he gets skewered and
Right.
Kavanaugh
If
walked
Brett
away.
Kavanaugh
Now,
gets in and Fairfax
Kavanaugh was going
Yeah.
for the highest court in the land,
Yeah.
and that's not quite the same level, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think that's a good point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it's too early to tell if again, I actually have to probably disagree with you a little bit, Zed. I think that the blackface issue is, I think, a little bit more serious. Some high-profile Democrats have come out and said, Elizabeth Warren being one of them, have called for them to step down.
Right, but they have all the political incentive to posture one way, to say I'm not like that. I'm better. I'm look how woke I am. Northam is a one-term governor. He doesn't have to run for re-election. He can always become an independent if Democrats throw him under the bus. So I feel like it's a little bit easier for him, but you're right in terms of how the politics are for everyone else. They kind of get points for calling on him to resign.
I'm actually happy to hear you say, though, that's kind of a big deal, because as someone who was, in her 20s in the 80s, I look at the Village People. The Village People are. No one's gone after them, but they're all stereotypes. And
Well, there's a lot of celebrities, Jimmy Kimmel, Susan Silverman. I believe that one of the ladies on The View had done it at one point.
Yeah, Joy Behar.
Joy Behar.
Oh, Joy Behar.
This is something that I think
Yeah, she dressed up like a black singer.
And it's interesting. One of Dr. King's aides, Bernard Rustin, he actually wrote one time that he hopes that one day we'll reach a future where white people will do blackface, black people will do whiteface. They'll make fun of each other, and we'll just be as equals. Now, I don't think that's anytime soon, but it is an interesting, at least philosophical debate to have about why some people do this, because some people just do it like, if you're a 12-year-old kid and you want to be Black Panther and you happen to put some shoe polish on you, it's not the same thing as a minstrel show.
well, that's not the same thing as standing next to somebody.
Right.
It's the
Exactly.
proximity
Exactly.
to
Yeah,
the Klan.
And by the way, I want to
that
know
is
which one he
very
was in the
problematic.
photo, because we still haven't figured that out.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
also
which
not.
one?
It's also not the same when you end up running for public office.
Right.
It's one thing to be, a 12-year-old kid dressing up crazy, like a Ku Klux Klan or blackface crap. But another thing to do it and run for public office.
All right, great last statement. And finally, the New England Patriots defeated the Los Angeles Rams 13-3 in Super Bowl 53. However, the halftime show has gotten more attention than the lackluster game itself. So, Gregory Clay with GDClay.com will ask you this question. Which one do you think was worse, the actual game itself or the halftime show?
Well, first of all, let me say this. Remember, when Travis Scott said that he was going to appear in the Super Bowl, Jay-Z went off and tried to talk him out of it. No, you can't do that. Don't. Yeah, Maroon 5 and all that. They were chastised for performing because that's why they call off the usual news conference in the middle of the week. Because usually the top performing artist at the Super Bowl has a news conference at the Super Bowl site in the middle of the week. Because the controversy got so hot, Maroon 5 called it off. But that's where we are now. And the Super Bowl has become so political because the NFL has become so political because this whole Colin Kaepernick thing. Now, if you go to it and you want to perform, you're going to be chastised. Look what happened to Gladys Knight.
It's like you
Gladys
can't
Knight
win
was
for
ripped.
losing.
She was ripped, because she wanted to perform the She was asked, and she accepted and performed in the national anthem. A lot of folk ripped her. She was excoriated on some fronts. But Gladys, one thing I like, she just brush it off. She just brush it off and say, "Hey, I'm going to the Super Bowl. I'm performing. Because I want to bring style back to the Super Bowl." I said, "Hey, go ahead, Gladys." Furthermore, she's from that area, so it was like a home welcoming for her and everything. So politics abound, just like everything else right now.
So does that mean your answer is you thought the game was worse?
Whoa. well, I'll
And I'd love to hear some other.
I'll shut up. But all I'm going to say is that most people thought it would be a shootout because you got 2 of the 4 highest scoring teams in the league. But in a way, to me, it was kind of cool because the game was so tight throughout. I mean,
Christian, is that how you feel?
Yeah, I like that. A lot of people complain that because they wanted a high-scoring game like the last 2 Super Bowls. But this one, the fact that it was a defensive battle and they were neck and neck the whole time, and 2 offenses that had no problems getting the ball down the field all season, all of a sudden were struggling to even get first downs. That was actually kind of exciting for me to watch. Halftime show, I think my perspective on it, of course, the politics of the NFL also continue. There's definitely the Kaepernick cloud. I definitely agree with that. But this whole debacle with Adam Levine taking off his shirt, that actually conjured up some controversy, I think, from the feminists that I saw on Twitter, because it was reminiscent of when Janet Jackson had her very famous accident. And some people said, well, it's bizarre that Adam Levine, he can, as part of the show, he can take his shirt off and fully expose himself.
But Janet can't.
But Janet Jackson can't. So
they got fined.
Well, that was the wardrobe malfunction, I guess.
With Justin Timberlake.
That marred her. Her attempt. Zed, do you have an opinion on this?
I'm one of those folks who watches it for the commercials.
Whoa, you one of those?
I'm one of those. So
that 20% crowd.
I don't have as much of a comment on the game, but I did really like the Microsoft commercial where they were talking about how they've made controllers for their video games so that disabled people can easily play them. And I felt like that was the positive way to tackle an issue like that, as opposed to what Gillette did, which kind of turned a lot of people off and made them feel judged. I mean, Microsoft could have made a commercial judging people for being able. You have able privilege or whatever. Instead, they focused on the group of people whose lives they were trying to enhance. They were very empathetic, very sympathetic. I think everyone loved that commercial. Everyone I taught, everyone. It was a great commercial. So that's a good one to watch on YouTube if you missed it. So.
Okay, great. Well, let's take some questions from our viewers. Colin Rhodes, thanks so much for writing in. Will Democrats be as enthusiastic about ousting Northam, Fairfax, and Herring if it means Republicans will take their places? Who wants to answer this?
Well, that was Gregory's question. I think that at the very least, Democrats, like I said, are going to try to kind of tarnish the other side before they make a definitive decision. So if they can dig up a couple of blackface-esque photos of Republicans in the General Assembly, then I think it's less likely that they will really hold their Democrats really accountable and force them to step down. But if that kind of research comes up empty, I think they might have to make some more difficult decisions about that. But I think it's a little bit too early to tell now. They want to see how their polls do 1 or 2 weeks after the scandals.
Any response from anyone?
That's probably right. They'll probably wait.
Okay, and we've got a question from Florence Fields. Thank you. Can we expect Justin Fairfax to get the same kind of treatment that Brett Kavanaugh got? And I know we talked a
I think that I don't know anything about the details of what he's being accused of. I know that he didn't deny that the encounter happened, but he claimed that he believed it was consensual.
Well, I can fill you in on the details. They were apparently just having a kiss, and then suddenly it became more than that.
Right.
And
And if allegedly he forced her
Yeah.
to perform an act.
Yeah, she spelled it out in a letter that was public. It's all over social media. I mean, she spelled it out. She did like a play-by-play, you know, in tremendous graphic detail, you know, of which I won't repeat now because it's just too graphic for TV. You know,
Hopefully, an investigation happens and they actually figure out what happened. I'm always inclined to believe, at least have an instinct to believe.
That's what the
in
Democrats
accuser.
said.
That's right. Of course, like you said, the politics are going to make it a little bit more cloudy. They might not be championing due process quite as enthusiastically as they did with Brett Kavanaugh. Understandably so.
okay, now it's time for the most underreported story of the week. These are always fun. Who would like to start? Jed, hey, Zed, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I think, today, I think it was today or yesterday, some members of Congress introduced what's called a Green New Deal, which is basically their plan to shift America away from fossil fuels and sort of the carbon economy. I think within 10 years. I don't know that it's necessarily structured all that well. It seems kind of bare bones to me. But at least that these people are trying to start a conversation about climate change. I mean, this is a real impending crisis, a lot more of a crisis than someone's Facebook photo, which I'm sure is going to be the next scandal for the next Northam. It'll be a Facebook photo of someone who's like 25 now. But we really need to get our handle on this climate thing because we can't handle more extreme weather all over the world. It'll really harm our habitat, the only one we have.
So for me, of course, the Super Bowl was very much reported. But one thing about the Los Angeles Rams that's notable is that they are actually building a Disneyland status stadium, which is completely privately funded. Now, yearly, states across the country are giving out hundreds of millions in subsidies to stadiums, to sports stadiums. Basically, taxpayer money is going to these sports teams because they will create economic activity. And what those teams do is they usually claim that they don't have the money to fund the stadium. But the Rams are a shining example that you can use private funds to build a state-of-the-art stadium. You don't need taxpayer dollars to do it.
And for all baseball fans, sports fans in general, Frank Robinson died